dare you! Aww.
If Danielle Steele had not become the most successful romance author of all time, I bet you she still would have made a killing as a horror or thriller writer. To be honest, Danielle Steele has always been one of those authors that exist only in my peripheral vision, where like you go into a charity shop or you'd go past a book table in the supermarket and boom, there'd be like 2 or 3 Danielle Steeles. In the wake of discovering No Greater Love, I now play a game with my mother where every time we are in that situation, I play a game called Spot the Danielle Steele. Or if Danielle Steele's not there, for a very rare occasion, say spot the Dan Brown, spot the Ian Rankin, spot the Stephanie Meyer. It isn't out of snobbery that I've never picked up any of her books. It's just that my tastes were different because I've always preferred reading sci-fi or fantasy or gay stuff. And yes, I was very much on the YA dystopian bandwagon back in the day. Like, where do you think this tattoo came from? I'm surprised I got this far. No one's ever asked me about my tattoo. In this video, I'm going to compare the book and the film when it comes to the Titanic scenes. Tell you what, I made a huge mistake reading the Titanic chapters before bed because they were really scary. The emotion and the tension of the scenes is perfectly represented here. If anyone is looking for research on how to write fiction surrounding the Titanic, look here because it's useful. The film of No Greater Love almost passed by me when I was looking for Titanics to compare because this one's pretty obscure, but it's obscure for someone who lives in Europe and has never touched a Danielle Steele book before. NBC made this to broadcast on New Year's Day in 1996, so a lot of the scenes are filmed in winter to give a sort of holiday feels. One change you'll notice right away is that the Winfield family, who are originally from San Francisco in the book, where Danielle Steele currently lives, are now moved to Boston so they can have more winter scenes. This is the only version of Titanic on this list where the sinking is the inciting incident. Before and after this, the sinking is the climax or takes up the whole narrative. The main question this story intends to answer is something I've wanted out of a Titanic adaptation for ages. How does a family move on from this disaster, especially when they lost what would have been their future? The story focuses on the Winfield family, but mostly around the eldest daughter, Edwina. At the beginning of the story, the Winfields are a happy family who run a newspaper. Kate and Bert, the mother and father, have 6 children, 4 in the movie, and are still very much in love. Edwina is married to a British man named Charles. While they're on the Titanic, the second daughter, Alexis, is going to turn 6. Then the Titanic strikes the iceberg. Charles, Kate and Bert all die in the sinking, while Edwina puts herself in charge of looking after her younger siblings and running the family's newspaper. However, this comes at the expense of her own happiness, as she doesn't feel she can love someone the way she loved Charles. I should warn people now that Tetley's come to sit on my lap and you will hear purring in the background. The story goes into the 1920s, where Edwina manages to let go of the past and repair some of the damage that was created in the wake of the disaster. Book and film are pretty close in terms of the story, but there are a few changes there. First, as I said, the number of Winfield children has been reduced. The eldest son, Philip, has been composited with the second son, George. The youngest daughter, Fanny, is merged with the youngest son, Teddy. In the book, Philip dies in the First World War, and I can understand why they might want to cut him just to streamline the story and focus more on Edwina. The first 8 chapters are like candy to a Titanic enthusiast. It follows the family from where they are staying in England all the way to when they arrive back home, and it does not let up with how heavy it is. You can tell Steele really did her homework when it came to describing the ship and has the family interacting with the real people. She even includes the near collision with the New York. The only flaw was she mentioned that when the ship hits the iceberg it causes a gash on the hull, but you know what, I don't care. The sinking is told from an omnipresent third person perspective. That means it isn't fixed to one person and speaks from an unbiased viewpoint. So it goes from Edwina in the lifeboats to Kate and Bert still on the ship to Alexis, who goes back to the cabin without her family knowing. Edwina is made to get in the first lifeboat released by Lightoller with George, Teddy and Fanny. They see a girl in the boat who they think is Alexis, but Kate won't leave the ship without Bert and Philip. Philip is 17, so he's too old to be let on by Lightoller. The narration explains that they don't know about Murdoch's leaner policy on the other side. It isn't until they're most of the way down that Edwina realises that the girl isn't Alexis. Philip manages to survive in the final plunge with Jack Thayer, but Kate and Bert decide to go down together. Which means I can finally use this joke.
Well, at least they have their parents. Their parents are dead.
Some things are different in the film, likely to crowd the extras together so the set doesn't look so empty. The film begins on the night of 14th of April, where they're already celebrating Alexis's birthday and doesn't feature any of the real people who are on the ship. Either way, this shows how close the family is. Alexis wanders off because her nanny runs away in a panic. In the book, the nanny found out her relatives were in steerage and went down to help them, but they couldn't find their way back up again. The family break off to find Alexis, so Edwina is put in one of the last lifeboats with Teddy. George and Charles jump off the ship in the final plunge, and they're close enough for Edwina to pull George on board, but Charles is pulled down by the suction. This kind of works as it makes their love story more tragic, and if the love of her life went down so heroically, it makes sense why she wouldn't easily move on from that. Alexis is found by a steward before it's too late and gets tossed in one of the collapsibles, and her siblings manage to find her on the Carpathia, though she is deeply traumatised. Sadly, this movie didn't have the budget to really show the Titanic scale, and it doesn't show the breakup, despite when the movie was made it was now indisputable fact that the ship split, because they didn't have the budget or stock footage to actually show the breakup. But in the book it is excellently described. Right, I may be good with the Force, but I must wear my glasses for this. Now those in the lifeboat sat and watched as the bow plunged into the ocean so sharply that the stern swung up in mid-air, pointing at the sky like a giant black mountain. The lights seemed to remain on, strangely, for a long time, blink off finally, come on again, and then disappear for good in the terrifying darkness. But still the stern stood pointing out at the sky, looking like a demonic mountain. There was a hideous roar from within as everything possible came loose and shattered, a din mixed with cries of anguish as the forward funnel broke off and hit the water in a shower of sparks, with a thunderous noise that made Alexis scream as she lay in her blanket beside a total stranger. And then, as Edwina watched the 3 giant propellers outlined on the stern against the sky, there was a roar like no other she had ever heard, as though the entire ship was being torn asunder. Many explained it afterward as sounding as though the ship were actually breaking in half, but all were told that this couldn't have happened. All Edwina knew as she watched the hideous sight was that she didn't know where Charles or Philip or Alexis or her parents were, or if any of them had made it to safety. She clung tightly to George's hand, and for once he had no words for what they had both seen, and she pulled him close to her and hid his eyes as they both cried in lifeboat number 8, watching the tragedy that had befallen the unsinkable Titanic. Christ, that's heavy stuff. The film depended mostly on showing footage from SOS Titanic to show parts of the disaster where the Winfield family aren't involved. The interior sets of the ship have little resemblance to the actual Titanic interiors. The ballroom looks strikingly similar to the one used in Atlantic. Some exterior ship scenes, like SOS Titanic, use the Queen Mary, which is docked in Long Beach, California. But you know what? I really did enjoy this movie. It's melodramatic, but I like the characters, and I actually believe that these people act like a family, even after the 10-year time jump, and Alexis and Teddy are now recast with Gina Phillips and Hayden Christensen. It's kind of like watching a community theatre production, but there is so much heart and effort in it that it has a charm all to itself. I used to be an usher in a theatre that was often hired out by Amdram companies, or student drama societies, that would put on plays and musicals. One day I was called into a shift at the last minute and was pleasantly surprised watching a Tennessee Williams play. I've seen student productions of Chicago, Footloose, Phantom of the Opera, Maiden Dagenham, Spring Awakening and Legally Blonde, and they were all awesome. Atlantic seems to represent the other side of the community theatre spectrum, however, and yes, I have seen some very bad community theatre. I still remember 4 shifts ushering a musical where the main guy could not sing and would not listen to feedback. I think the story really does compensate for the lack of visual scale. Something everyone loves is a family drama, and no greater love has it in bundles. Edwina's lost the love of her life, George is bunking off school and later running the family-owned newspaper into the ground to pursue his dream as a theatre director. Alexis is taken advantage of by a much older man, and Teddy is going to commit space genocide. It's all over the place.
What did I do?
The film mainly focuses on the fractured relationship between Edwina and Alexis, especially when she hears Edwina voice her resentment at their mother for not getting in the boat with them, leaving her to have to take care of the family. Edwina keeps her own personal trauma to herself in order to put the family first, and even though Alexis keeps defying her and shutting her out, Edwina doesn't stop loving her, and understands she is like this because of the trauma from losing her parents. I do love the contrast between the pre-war and post-war aesthetics. Who doesn't love historical costuming when it's done right? I love the humour towards prohibition shared by Edwina and Sam Horowitz, whom she eventually finds happiness with. I love watching Teddy be the most relatable character, where he's the youngest person at a social gathering. Believe me, I've been there. You're not here to network, you're not here to dance, you just came for the cake. Maybe if he'd been allowed to have more cake, he wouldn't have become Darth Vader. And yes, it doesn't ignore that the family are scarred as a result of their experience on the Titanic. There wasn't a single survivor who was left unchanged after that night. There were instances of people suffering mental breakdowns when they got on another ship. Edwina and George both talk about their reluctance to travel by sea again, but when Alexis runs away with a much older man, who is basically Alec d'Urberville, Edwina confronts her fears to save her. The family manages to move on with their lives by letting go of old grudges, and letting new people into their lives who care about them. In a hypothetical future adaptation, it'd make a good mini-series, which gives more time to explore the siblings' traumas. Teddy may be the least affected of the Winfields, but you could make a storyline of what it's like to have a massive tragedy in your family that you were present for but you don't remember. How does generational trauma affect Titanic survivors? Because people might be prodding me to mention it, Edwina is played by Kelly Rutherford of Melrose Place. I haven't seen it, I probably never will, but one of the series directors played Tony Newman in The Time Tunnel. Yep, everything Titanic related is connected, like a really, really weird tapestry. Despite its lower production values, this has been a lot more enjoyable than most of the Titanics I've seen thus far, thus it ranks so high. The previous entries have either been so boring to the point of being unwatchable, or they have this arrogance about them that wants to claim that they're the definitive version of Titanic, while making insulting changes just to add drama. The film sort of had this message like, this is the story we want to tell. We're not perfect, but we have the heart, and I can't hate it for that. If there was heart in this, can you really rake it over the coals? No. Just enjoy something for being what it is. I suggest giving it a watch if you can find it. I don't have Peacock, I've never used Peacock, I probably won't use Peacock, but if it is on Peacock, that's probably the most likely place it will be because it was made by NBC before it became MSNBC. If you're looking for historical fiction on Titanic, read the book, but not before bed. It will give you nightmares. Plus, for all the Star Wars fans out there, you will get a kick out of watching this family be so dysfunctional, where George and Alexis are shouting all the time, and yet the most chill family member is Anakin Skywalker. Like, how dysfunctional does one family have to be for the most chill member to be Anakin Skywalker? Baby Hayden Christensen is adorable. I just think he's so cute. He's so cute. Makes me kind of wish, oh, they should have put him in Phantom Menace, seriously. Instead of just having him like, boom, and then boom. See, originally I was going to do this video wearing this t-shirt. But then I bought a ticket to the Star Wars celebration and I thought, I'm going to make a Jedi cosplay. And boom! Here I am. This video has most likely come out after I've been to the Star Wars celebration. But hey, I made some touches to myself. I enjoyed it. I liked making it. It was fun. Got a sewing machine just to make it. I serve fulcrum, as you can see, just in case I lose this at the convention and I'm like, oh, it's got a fulcrum symbol on it that I embroidered on myself. I just realised those are two different coloured threads. Doesn't matter.